We do have a ton to get through in this episode.
Common sense is finally prevailing.
There was controversy this month, Dave.
I'm not particularly excited by that.
Secrets and things on set.
I haven't told them anything.
I think this is just good times all round.
Every Doctor Who is liked by somebody, and that's a really good thing.
Davo, my doctor.
I know we disagree on this one.
First world problems, Dave.
I get why fans are asking those questions.
Oh gosh, that's actually quite a lot to talk about.
It doesn't compute.
It's the elephant in the room.
That's okay.
Fandom versus the BBC.
The cardinal sin.
Moving along.
Lunch. Hello, I'm Dave.
And I'm Rob.
And welcome to episode 427 of the Doctor Who Show. How are you, Rob?
I'm very well, Dave. This feels like deja vu for some reason.
It does. We are recording this in the depth of the Australian winter, just after the solstice. It is our darkest of days. Is it a dark day for Doctor Who and Doctor Who fandom? We're going to discuss that, Rob. But listeners may have noticed this dropped on a Saturday. So listeners, what happened was we recorded our episode for June as we normally would, including a slightly larger than normal news section, because there was a lot of news to discuss, as I'm sure you're aware. We then realised that about half the episode was the news section, and it was a better part of an hour before we got to the actual monthly topic.
Yeah, we got a bit carried away.
We did, so we thought it's probably not fair to make people listen to 1 2-hour episode or to make people sit through an hour of news discussion if they're just here for our Ncuti Gatwa era cold take. So we've made the call. We're going to split this episode down the middle and do a part 1 and a part 2. Hopefully that works. As always, listeners, give us your feedback.
Yeah, so this is an all-new intro. You won't hear the original intro. It's lost in time now. It's a junked episode, Dave.
Give us the Irwin cut.
Oh, I still might have the files somewhere.
So, yes, listeners, what you are about to hear is what we recorded a couple of days ago as part 1, and we'll be back at the end of that, and then tomorrow you'll get part 2.
Yes, you will.
But for now, here's the news. So, Rob, tell us in a sentence, what's the news this month?
Dave, the news this month, which I guess all Doctor Who fans have caught up with, is that the Christmas episode, as we spoke about in our last episode, is cancelled. And Doctor Who will be tendering for a new partner. That means Bad Wolf's out of the picture, RTD's out of the picture. Doctor Who will be going forward with a new partner, but who that partner is, well, we won't know until the tender happens.
Yeah, so we'll be discussing in a little bit how we can describe this period of the show. I'm going to contend we don't really have a word for where we are right now, but we'll get to that. First of all, let's just say straight out factually, I don't think that it is any shock that we are not getting a Christmas special. We have been saying in our news segment for some months now, Rob, that the fact that there isn't even a production office turned on at this point in the year was a very important data point that a show was not likely to happen. And as I did say last month, that to me is a very logical thing, because you already have got Doctor Who dangling in a very odd point, narratively speaking, to just extend and complicate that point when you're trying to restart a show would have been just bizarre and complicated and made life more difficult for whoever's going to pick up the narrative or not, as the case may be in the future.
Yeah, exactly right. So I've got to say 30,000 feet view of all this, Dave. I'm happy. Let's not bury the lead here. I didn't like the RTD2 era as a whole, and I spent season 1 and 2 of Ncuti specifically contenting myself that while it wasn't hitting the mark for me, one day it would be over and we would get a shot at something different, because that's Doctor Who in a nutshell, right? And now it is over. RTD, gone. Bad Wolf, gone. All the cronies, gone. How can I not be happy with that? I'm less happy, though, with the timeline of things we were told were happening with great certainty and even details over the space of a year or so, and how that all fell over in the end. It really felt like PR spin was a defining sort of aspect for this era, when just being straight down the line with fandom would have worked out so much better for us all. It might have created some headlines along the way, sure, but I think it would have been better in the long run.
Yeah, look, where I'm sitting personally is similar to you. I was having a conversation with a very good friend over dinner a couple of days ago when we were discussing that there are some people in life who would rather be single than be in a bad relationship, but some people who are happier being in even a bad relationship than being single, and they're different types of people, and there's neither right or wrong. And I think that's the same for fans right now. Now, you and I, Rob, I think I can safely say, would rather there be no Doctor Who than Doctor Who that is meandering or lacks a vision or isn't working.
Yes.
There are fans out there that would rather there be Doctor Who that is imperfect rather than no Doctor Who. Those are very valid views, and different people will be at different points on that spectrum. You and I have long said would rather, as I say, really good Doctor Who, and if it takes a break or it takes time to get to a really robust, well-made show, we're very happy to take that time. You mentioned there the PR, of course. Now, there was the official statement from the BBC that was very factual, very much stated what was happening and what was not happening. There was I won't say a co-statement, but a simultaneously timed statement from outgoing showrunner, creative head of Bad Wolf Studios, whatever you want to call him, Russell T Davies, and it was absolutely extraordinary. Now, I don't know if he meant that to sound snarky and petulant, but oh my goodness, did it read as snarky and petulant.
Oh, it really did. And it just made fandom, who were already angry with this for different reasons, even angrier. Just his tone, people found extraordinary. And just the way it was just one in an ongoing stream of things he had said over time. I mean, let's look at this Christmas app being cancelled. We had RTD talking previously about writing it. We had Murray Gold confirming there were multiple scripts. We had RTD saying he'd pitched it to the BBC executives last year and their jaws were agape, his words. They were just loving it. RTD giving us literal words from it in his Dwim column last December. Then he turned around this month and in that statement is like, psych, I didn't write anything. Sorry? What? Half of fandom thinks it's total bullshit that he didn't write something, while the other half believes he didn't write something and they think that's total bullshit. So he's getting it from both sides of fandom. Then, of course, unless you kept score of what he was saying at any given moment over the last couple of years, it's very easy to forget there was tons of other stuff. There was RTD talking years ago about being deep into forward planning on season 3 and 4. There were plans for this much bigger Whoniverse and so on. The Whoniverse actually was meant to be a big deal. And now people wonder, and this is part of their anger, with all the stuff he said over the last 3 or 4 years, what was real and what was just hot air?
Yeah, the statement definitely to me had vibes of Richard Nixon's famous press conference when he lost the California governor's race in 1962. This will be my last press conference. You won't have Nixon to kick around anymore. And it really had those sort of vibes.
Yes.
I think the language was, I can't say deliberately inflammatory, but it's hard to read it as anything else when he uses phrases like, that's just something we cooked up for the press, when he's talking about the Christmas special. And I think there are fans who feel lied to. Now, okay, fine, it's a TV series. This isn't the Prime Minister, fine. But why? I've been saying this since the Chibnall era, this idea that you need to spin news in Doctor Who and, we're definitely making something, it's coming back, and they actually have no plans of making something. I mean, apart from the fact most Doctor Who fans are pretty well versed in how television works, and so they know that if there's no production office and no one's been hired to scout locations and nobody's been hired to get some camera equipment, there's not going to be a show next week. We know that. Why lie to us? Why pretend? I mean, if they had come out months ago and said, we're not making any more Doctor Who, would anything have changed?
No. And this is what I mean when I said earlier that they should have just been straight down the line. It would have worked out much better in the long run. It would have created those headlines along the way, but it just would have been better all round. And it does make me question, Dave, At what point did Disney say, Christ, this really is shit? You know, we're not throwing more money at this. Was it as soon as they got the tapes of season 1? Was it when they saw the public's reaction to season 1? Could it have been that early? At which point RTD and Bad Wolf and the BBC would have known they had a complete albatross hanging around their necks, but had to soldier on for another year and promote a second season, knowing it was going to go absolutely nowhere. And is that why in October of 2025, when Disney said, yep, we're not continuing with the show, the BBC had the line ready about making a Christmas episode for December 2026 by hook or by crook? We're going to do this under our own steam. How long had they known in order to run with that immediately?
Yeah, look, there were rumours flying going all the way back to season 1 of the Gatwa era that it was not a happy production. I can't validate any of those rumours, so I'm just putting them out here very clearly as rumours that we have heard. There were rumours that Disney and RTD had very different visions of the show. There are rumours that RTD and Ncuti Gatwa had very different visions of his role as the Doctor, both on and behind the camera. I don't know if any of that is true, but certainly those rumours have been around. I think the thing that we really don't know that will be very interesting to maybe find out one day in a tell-all book is what was the conversation between the BBC and Bad Wolf, and when did that happen? Now, if that was a recent conversation, and it was one form or another of when we make more Doctor Who, we've decided we're not going to do it with you, then maybe that is the reason why things have not been said to us earlier, because the BBC were sitting there going, we have got some issues. We've just had our streaming partner pull out for a number of financial and potentially creative differences. Again, if the rumours are true, creative differences are a big part of that. We don't know. Did the BBC then sit down and go, well, what Bad Wolf is making is not working, we therefore need to release them from their relationship with the BBC? And did somebody sit down with RTD and say, you're fired? Or, words to that effect.
Yeah.
I don't know. And if that was the conversation and the BBC was the ones who said, it's not us, it's you, we don't want to see each other anymore, that might explain why RTD was wounded and difficult in his statement. We don't know. We're speculating. I look forward to the tell-all book in 20 years' time.
Yeah, well, look, as I said last episode, all of this could come true. We might not have a Christmas special and all of this, but gosh, wouldn't that be egg on RTD's face? I think there is egg on RTD's face. I think there's egg on the BBC's face to some degree too. And I think his getting on the front foot and punching back is part of his reaction to that egg on his face.
No, I agree. I also think a number of people owe Robert Shearman an apology for the way he was really taken to task.
Yeah.
When he made comment that the way that the show had been left without a incumbent Doctor that could then go on and be used in comics and books in the way that the McCoy Doctor was in 89 and onwards. He has called that absolutely correctly, and I think most people have come around to that way of thinking. So well done, Robert Shearman, and the Spin Masters had their fun with you, but you're the one who got the last laugh.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, RTD effectively spiked the show. It was a poison pill. We'll call it whatever you want. He blew it up. He didn't have to.
Yeah, and look, I do want to make two high-level comments, and that is to do with the RTD vision of the show. I think that it's very hard to decide what makes a show work. Why is it that The Big Bang Theory has 1 billion episodes? Why is it that Dad's Army got 1 million episodes and 1 billion seasons? Why is it that Blake 7 had 10 million viewers? And I've said before, it's very hard to say it's any one thing that makes a show work. It's usually multiple things that all work off each other with a force multiplier effect. In that context, RTD comes back for his second gig, and he's saying, what about my first time in the show worked well? And I think he's taken not the wrong messages, but extreme versions of those messages. He said, well, people liked the fact that it was now a more relatable show. We all know that RTD's big success in 2005 was to take something that could have been a niche cult sci-fi fantasy show like a B5 or a Buffy and turn it into a mainstream hit in the UK, at least like The X-Files or Star Trek The Next Generation. That was a massive success, and some of the things he did in that in terms of moving it away from harder sci-fi to a more family-friendly thing that's grounded in London, where the Doctor can now be a figure of romance. We're not to my taste, but I recognised, as you did, Robin, and as many of our friends did, that that's what you need for a mainstream hit. RTD's clearly looked at that and gone, well, that's what worked. I'll do even more of that. And I think he therefore lost the key elements of Doctor Who. He said, we'll make the Doctor himself, not just a character with romantic potential and undertones. We will make him overtly a sexual character. If there is any doubt that the Doctor shags, it was removed by Ncuti Gatwa, who was just, I say the horniest Doctor ever, the horny Doctor. Like that is is his thing. And it's very contemporaneous language. He's basically, hey everybody, he could be down at the nightclub with you Gen Zs right now, and it would just be one of your friends. And you go, well, that's lovely and relatable, but the Doctor shouldn't be that relatable. The Doctor should be, at some level, alien, distant. And I think that, therefore, he lost some of that character in going too far down that path. And the second point is, he said, oh, you know what they loved? That Bad Wolf Torchwood stuff. And he turned that from just we'll say Bad Wolf once every now and then, and in the end it turns out there's a character called Bad Wolf, into the full mystery box concept of television. It is very, very, very rare, Rob, that mystery boxes pay off in television. Their failures are legendary and many. Their successes, I would argue B5 did it. I would argue Stranger Things did it well. Occasionally they pull off what I would call a plot twist, but proper mystery boxes of just setting up over the course of what's happening here, who's that person, what's going on, what's the answer to all these questions we're asking over multiple seasons, rarely pay off. And I think he looked at television and said, oh, everybody's doing a mystery box, I'll do a mystery box. And, well, I'll finish that thought when we get to our main segment, Rob.
Interesting.
Now, Rob, I said earlier that I don't think we have a word for where we are. Now, I will ask you the question and then I will give my feedback. Has Doctor Who been cancelled?
Well, I do have a word for it, but I'll get to it as I work through it, I think. Since the announcement, Dave, we've had the usual YouTube pop culture grifters, as I like to call them, who seem to have no real idea about Doctor Who, absolutely dancing a jig and declaring Doctor Who is cancelled. And you sit there watching them on YouTube and you think, you wankers, it's not cancelled. It's your fantasy that it's cancelled. You've begged for it to be cancelled for years because you didn't like Doctor Who being black or gay or a woman and so forth. And you could never see past that stuff to the bigger picture. But park that. The BBC is out there saying, literally in line with its charter and agreement requirements, which YouTube grifters wouldn't know if those requirements bit them on the bum. We're going to tender. We want to make more. That's about as far as you can get from cancelled in my mind. And what's really surprised me in the wake of that, Dave, and I just can't ignore this, was how many Average Joe fans picked up the grifter narrative that it's cancelled and ran with that instead. And if I can go on, I was like, am I in Bizarro world here? We have the BBC putting out a tender to make Doctor Who. And these people are declaring Doctor Who is cancelled. Is this a new definition of cancelled, perhaps, Dave? Can you be actively trying to make something and people still call you cancelled? I've got to say, I've never heard of a cancelled TV show making more episodes. So I find regular Doctor Who fans buying into this nonsense really strange. The best I can come up with is that they're really angry with the Christmas episode being cancelled. And they're angry with how duplicitous RTD has come across. And that's fine. Be angry about that stuff by all means. But as the grifters invite anger and embody anger, and they feed on anger, the regular Joe fans are gravitating to what the grifters say. You know, like, oh, look, here's someone who's angry like me. I feel a kinship towards them, and I think I'll subscribe to their views. But that doesn't make everything the grifters say correct. That's the danger in these situations, because the show isn't cancelled. And I know I haven't got to my word for it, Dave, but I'll take a breath and let you have a say.
So I have said before online particularly that this period feels very like the 1989-1991 period where nobody came out and said Doctor Who is cancelled. We're going to make more seasons. We're just going to get a new producer, fine-tune it. There will be a season 27. Well, there won't be season 27, but there'll be something. Oh, and now we're talking to Steven Spielberg, and now Steven Verity. Yeah, and you suddenly you just realise actually no, nobody's actually making Doctor Who, and we are in a wilderness years. I think that right now we are in, and again, I don't want to be pejorative by picking which one it is. I don't know whether we're in Schrodinger's hiatus or Schrodinger's cancellation. Because at some point we're going to look back at this announcement and go, this was the start of New Who Phase 3, or we're going to go back and go, that was the start of a long cancellation. I say that because all we know at this point is that the show will, future tense, be put to tender. We don't know what the conditions of that tender will be. We don't know whether the BBC will specify a form they want the show in, whether they want a certain number of episodes of a certain number of minutes, etc., etc., etc. The BBC will put the show out to tender. Now, if you want insight into how producers put together tenders and concepts for funding, go back to the end of last year for my interview with Dylan Rees, who is a producer, an Emmy-winning producer, and we talk about that in a lot of depth. So I encourage you to go and listen to that. At that point, organisations will put in bids and pitches to win the tender to make Doctor Who. Therefore, there are companies out there doing two things. One of them very fun, one of them very boring. The fun one is they're sitting there going, creatively, what does our pitch for Doctor Who look like? Is it a grounded 70s Pertwee style X-Files with a Time Lord on Earth series? Is it a very Star Trek-y, we're going to be in a different world every time type series? Is it going to be a very conventional Doctor? Is it going to be a very different Doctor? It could be that parts of these pitches to tender attach directors or writers or even actors to their pitch and say, we have got an in-principle agreement that if we get the contract, we can sign, I don't know, Tom Holland as the Doctor. The boring thing they're doing is saying, how much money does it cost to make the show we want to make? And, that's a very high amount of money. I don't think we'll win the bid with that. What can we cut to do it?
Yeah.
BBC will look at those pitches, partly through a creative lens, mostly through a financial lens. It is not impossible at that point the BBC says, you know what? To make good Doctor Who is too expensive. Thank you, we're not accepting any of these bids. We're going to go away. We're going to deal with some financial issues at the BBC, and maybe in 5 years' time we'll have another crack at this. It may be that they say that bid is exactly what we're looking for. We want to do it. Or it may be that the BBC says to a company, we like what you're saying, but the amount of money you have is way outside our budget. If you can come back with overseas sales or a streaming deal, you can have the contract. We don't know.
No, we don't know, but I still think it's fair to say that the show is not cancelled at this moment in time. Because I think what people are trying to do is harken back to 89, 90, and trying to get ahead of the story. Like, oh God, it happened then. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm going to say it's cancelled now so I don't get my pants pulled down on this issue in a year or 2 or 3 or 4's time. I think that's what people are trying to do. But I don't think you can do that because the show isn't cancelled. We haven't even got the tender out there yet. And I do think that the TV market and TV production is in a much different place to where things were at in 89, 90. One of the bidders for this tender could well be, and I think will well be, BBC Studios itself.
Yep.
So if incredibly expensive or out there tenders come in, I think there's still going to be a BBC Studios tender in there, and they might just win it. And then, I don't know, you got Pete McTighe taking over Doctor Who, and it's made pretty much in-house. It's BBC Studios, but it's still the BBC. I think that's where it's heading, and at this moment in time, it's not cancelled. And if there must be a term for it, here comes my word. I think it's that the show is in limbo. I think you've already said limbo in this conversation, Dave. We're still in the middle of an unresolved situation. That's literally what limbo is. That's the term for it if anyone needs to use a term. I don't even feel the need to use a term, but if you need one, there it is. It's not cancelled. It's in limbo. There is a difference.
Yes, I think that's very fair. I think that in the same way you're pushing back on people who are saying definitively it is cancelled, and I agree, you can't yet use that word. I'm pushing back on people. Yeah, I'm pushing back on people definitively saying, well, it is in production, because it clearly isn't. Whatever happens, if Doctor Who is turned on again, and look, I think you're right, it is more probable than not that Doctor Who will be made.
Yeah.
It is not, however, a certainty, and there are definitely paths, and there have been articles out recently about the BBC struggling with, budgetary requirements, which is insane given the size of its budget. Just let me put that out there. Like, if they can't... Sorry, I won't go down my BBC path. I'll upset all the Brits who think that the BBC is the best thing ever invented. It's not, guys. Look at the rest of the world. Anyway, it is it is certainly possible the BBC just says we can't afford Doctor Who right now, unless, as I say, an overseas production company or streamers come in. I just think we don't know at this stage what's going to happen. The one thing we do know is I think we can officially say we are in a wilderness years, very possibly until, look, at least 2028. I think more realistically, probably 2030.
Yeah, look, let's split the difference and say 2029. Say this tender takes until the end of the year. That takes us to 2027. Then this production team, with its foot flat to the floor, pedal to the metal, spends 18 months writing and filming the thing. That takes you through to mid-2028. Post-production takes you through to the start of 2029. It goes out March, April of 2029, at the very earliest, assuming nothing goes wrong. Throw in another year's worth of, what ifs and maybes, and it is 2030. Yes, which would then be 5 years after Ncuti Gatwa went off screen, because there are people saying, it needs a break, it needs at least 5 years off. Well, it's going to get probably 4 years, if not 5 years off, even if this plan comes to fruition. So that wish has already been granted, guys. Yeah. Yeah,
and there have been plenty of shows that have won a contract and then gone into development hell. We all know that. Or what was that line from Argo? Oh, sorry, my movie's in turnaround. Oh, sorry, mate. These things happen. Things happen. A really interesting question that now comes up for Doctor Who fans is when it does come back, hard reboot, soft reboot, pick up exactly where RTD left off. What do you think, Rob?
I'm not a fan of the hard reboot. I'd like a soft reboot, but I don't need it to have Billy Piper and resolve all of that nonsense, that poison pill, that bomb RTD left for the next production team. We don't need that. I think we just start with a new Doctor running around, just like we started Eccleston off with a new Doctor running around. And I've said this online several times, and maybe 2 or 3 or 4 episodes into it, he's talking to his new companion. And he says, look, I've had many faces in my time. I once had my friend's face for 5 minutes. And people can assume he's referring to having Billy Piper's face, and it only was for 5 minutes sometime in the past. And that's the only reference that ever gets made to it. But it's acknowledged, and we tick that box for the fans who need every box ticked. I'd like to see something like that. I don't need a hard reboot. I'm guessing you're going to say differently, though.
Yeah, look, I've heard a couple of good conversations about this. The guys over at Bergenbeard on YouTube had a conversation. The guys over at Paul to Open had a conversation. And indeed, Chris on Paul to Open said almost exactly what you did, Rob, which is that they can just start like Rose, have the Doctor in harness, doing Doctor things, and yes, at some point he says, by the way, remember the time, or maybe there's a flashback, then you get Billy Piper back for a special or whatever. That is definitely a way to do it. I haven't heard very many people say we must pick up and answer the what the hell was going on with Billy Piper's face question, and I cannot imagine any production company, with the possible exception of BBC Studios, particularly wanting to start with just, well, the first thing we're going to do is try to explain what happened in this cliffhanger 4 or 5 years ago. I just don't see how that would be a good start. Look, as you predicted, Rob, I am in favour of the hard reboot. I think that Doctor Who is weighed down by 60 plus years of continuity and ideas and I would be very happy to do something like the Tomorrow People did when they had both of their reboots, like Roswell did when it had its reboot. Admittedly, much more time happened between those, but basically just come back with a whole new series and a new audience can discover the same things again. The Doctor meets the Daleks for the first time, however you want to do that. Does the Doctor come from Gallifrey? Well, we don't know until we say it in this new series. Starting again with a fresh slate would be my preferred pick. I understand I'm in a minority there.
Yeah, I just think there's too much baggage, and anything you do would be constantly referenced back to the past. And, we did it better back in the day. I think he met the Daleks better back in the Daleks. It would just become a bit of a weight around its neck, I think. That's where I sit.
And this is the problem that a lot of franchises are having at the moment. Star Trek is in the same position. Bond is in the same position. How much do you try to make your product straddling fans who've been watching this for 50 or 60 years? And there are fans. I mean, my dad has been watching Doctor Who since the 23rd of November 1963, and he's not the only one. And there are others who've grown up with it in all different eras.
We've been watching since the 80s, Dave. That's 40 years ago.
That's right. And how much do you make it for a new audience who has never seen the show before and has expectations of the show? And that is a very difficult thing to bear, because the tones of what old school fans want and what studios think new audiences want can be very difficult to manage. And I think that Starfleet Academy struggled to try to match all those. I think one of the reasons why Bond is in turnaround at the moment is because it is trying to work out, well, do we stay loyal to this character who worked really, really well in the 60s, but, now would be cancelled if we made it in the 2020s? And how do we bridge that gap? Do we just say, well, we're going to do an old school Bond and accept that our average age, of our fans will be older? Or do we say, as let's face it, I think RTD did, well, those fans can get on board or go to hell. I'm making it for the youth. And try and do that. And that brings me to my final point, Rob, about, where this show is. I think that RTD fundamentally misread where television is right now, in that he had this view that Doctor Who had to push a very particular narrative that is very much in trend online in some places, but came perhaps at the expense of the narrative. And a really good point I saw about this on social media last week, and I think, sorry I didn't write down who said it, but they're making a number of points, and they said, Doctor Who should not be overtly political in the future. Brackets, yes, we all know the Main the Green Death and the Barry Litz era happened, but you tell me one story from the Tom Baker era that was political. To which I thought, that's a really good point. And I could add the Troughton era, and I could probably add the Baker era. Does Doctor Who have an ethos, an oeuvre of being nice to each other, being never cruel and cowardly, of being preserving the environment and being pro-science? Of course it does. Does it often bang on about contemporaneous issues outside of the Pertwee era and, 3 Andrew Cartmel stories? Actually, no. And it's the same with Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek, again, has an oeuvre of multiculturalism and being nice to each other and a positive technology-driven future. Of course it does. Most episodes of Star Trek are just an adventure in that environment, and some of the most overtly political ones, and I'm looking at you, A Private Little War, I'm looking at you, Let This Be Your Last Battlefield, and I'm looking at you, the one whose name I can't remember, that ends with James Kirk reading the US Constitution to a bunch of people on a planet. They're terrible episodes. So I'm not saying that Doctor Who can't have a British lowercase liberal vibe to its feelings. Of course it can. And it can also do overtly political stories in the way that something like The Green Death or The Invasion of the Dinosaurs, or frankly any Malcolm Holt story could do. I say that again as somebody who ranks Malcolm Holt as my favourite Doctor Who writer. I love it when he does it. But if you're not doing it well, don't do it. And you don't have to do it in such an overt manner that goes from, that's really made me think. And I think about the Pete McTighe episode that had the microplastics. I watched that and I thought, I haven't really thought about that before. That's okay. That's an issue I should be more aware of. Well done, Doctor Who. I now feel informed. That is very different to if you are not on board with the language we are using, then you are a bad person and you are the wrong sort of person. We are here to, quote, upset you. Please leave my show.
Yeah. Yep, agreed. Now, Dave, I have jotted down a question without notice. It might have been good when we were talking about the tender process, but let me still ask it. Let's say Mr. Stephen Moffat puts up his hand and says, look, the Missus is CEO of Hartswood Films. I'm its creative director. We have a base in Cardiff Bay. You've worked with us before. We're a safe pair of hands. I'm regarded as one of the best Who writers who ever lived. I know Who better than anyone. I know what it needs to bounce back. How about it? What do you say, Dave, as the person in charge of the tender? Is that compelling? Award-winning Stephen Moffat wants to work with you.
Of course it's compelling. I think that Moffat had a lot of success. Different people prefer different seasons from his era, but that's the mark of an interesting and good creative. Then you get to the hypotheticals, right? Like, who else has made a bid? How are their bids compared to his? And what is the shape of his bid? If the shape of his bid is, I'm going to go back and do a lot more arcs and mystery boxes and things that were really trendy in television about 15 years ago, I might go, you know what, Stephen? Go back in time 15 years and make this bid. Mm-hmm. If he says, I've got something that I think is going to work and be interesting for what Doctor Who needs now, giddy up.
Yeah. For mine, I'd say no. And that's hard because I think Moffat writes intriguing Doctor Who, and I think he proved even during the RTD2 era that he still had something going on. But I think this has got to be a young person's game now. You know, maybe even a game for someone who's not a Doctor Who fan. I don't want a Pete McTighe. I'm sick of this let's pass the IP around between some mates vibe that's been in place since the revival. I want someone I've never heard of, an absolute clean skin to the world of Doctor Who, someone with a vision, you know, in their pitch. Of course, on top of that, there's an element of once bitten, twice shy. I was rapt that RTD was coming back when it was announced, and how bloody stupid does that joy feel now? So never again. Move on. Someone new.
Yeah, and this has been something I've sort of queried, as I've listened to a lot of the conversations where people have said, well, who do you want as the showrunner? And I'm like, I have no idea, because let's face it, outside of Doctor Who, I reckon I could probably name 3 showrunners. If it's not Aaron Sorkin, Joss Whedon, or J. Michael Straczynski, I probably don't know who's made my television show.
Ronald D. Moore, there's a 4th.
Ronald D. Moore, the Duffer Brothers. Okay, between us we can get to 5.
Yeah.
You know, and they're very particular cases. Most television, it's actually uncommon to know who the showrunner is, or frankly, to care.
Yeah, that's always been an anomaly of Doctor Who fans, to know who's on the production staff and what they do. It's something very weird about Doctor Who fans.
Yes, let alone have the head creative draft and write columns in the magazine telling you know, trying to spin their show to fans and justify things to fans and explain things to fans.
There even still is a magazine. Magazines based on IPs have gone the way of the dodo 20 years ago. Why Doctor Who magazine still exists, God only knows.
Yeah. Look, that's absolutely right. I think that it is a very bygone thing. I would be very happy if they said the new showrunner is this person, and I'm like, I've never heard of them before. Oh, what have they made in the past? Oh, they wrote for that. That was a good show. Oh, they were involved in that. I like that. Or I don't know, but the idea that we would know who the showrunner is actually very, very improbable.
Yeah, agreed.
So, Rob, I've said everything I had to say. Do you have any final thoughts?
I've still got some notes here, Dave. I'll try and condense them. I've been thinking about this a lot this past week, engaging with a lot of people online, as our listeners may have seen if they're on social too. I've been calling out some bullshit, you know, the whole 9 yards. And my thinking has led me to this. Each era of the show has had its own vibe. People look back now and they talk about the Hinchcliffe Gothic era, or the Williams era being comedic, or the Sayward video nasty era, you know, and so on. And I think in time, people will look back on the RTD2 era as its own weird thing. It's the audience being told that Davros has legs now because disabled people can't be evil. It's Neil Patrick Harris.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. See? It's Neil
yeah.
Patrick Harris dancing around to the Spice Girls. It's Ncuti Gatwa crying all the time. It's being told that sonic screwdrivers look like guns, so they have to change shape. It's, oh, babes, and playing in the TARDIS wardrobe. It's putting Billy Piper's head on Ncudi's body as some sort of joke/mystery box at the end of season 2 and it just blowing up in their face. It's questionable decisions at almost every turn. And a lot of this wasn't to many people's tastes. They couldn't reconcile this stuff as being Doctor Who, or at least the kind of Doctor Who they want to invest their time in. So people are just ropeable. First about how the era played out over time, and second about how it ended so badly. And I get all of that. But I do think in a decade's time, when we're another 2 or 3 Doctors along, people will just talk about it like any other era of the show. Yes, for these 3 years, the show was like that. And some people liked it, and a lot of people didn't. And the contrarians will have arrived by then to say how it was really misunderstood, and it was actually great. It was the best era ever. You know, the contrarians always pop up like that. And
or people who genuinely did like the era, which do exist.
In very small numbers. And it will be it will be just part of a bigger tapestry, because one era doesn't define the show. One era has never defined the show. But right now, a lot of the haters are acting like RTD2 has defined the show for all time. It's wrecked it for all time. It's a very dramatic reading. It assists their arguments that he's wrecked the show, but it's not a realistic reading.
Yeah, I think that the wheelchair thing you mentioned there encapsulates perfectly what I was saying before. You know, RTD putting a main heroic character in a wheelchair as part of the show was really good representation, a really positive thing, and it's kind of stunning Doctor Who hadn't done more of that before.
Sure.
To then go and say, we're now going to retcon Davros because having a bad guy who needs to use an alien wheelchair that I never even thought of as a wheelchair is like that's just a whole... That to me is a very good example of where the line is.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely it is. And I think we'll get even further into that when we do our discussion on the Ncuti Gatwa era specifically. For now, though, it's customary to do some short topics. We'll do a shorter segment, I think, now, Dave, after a pretty long intro there. What have you got for us?
I'm going to kick us off by just saying quickly, as I said in our May episode, I had read 2 EDAs, the Turing Test and Endgame, and I'd really enjoyed them. I, of course, read the next one, Father Time, for the show about a year ago, and I thought, well, I'm going to go on now and finally read the end of this Doctor's stuck on Earth with lots of wars happening and lost his memory arc. I'm sure there's a sexy title for it, but I don't know what it is. And that is, of course, Escape Velocity, which I did read. And this has been really interesting. First of all, let me say, I really enjoyed the book. It wasn't as good as, say, The Turing Test or certainly Father Time. No, but they're very good books. But this was, to me, a really enjoyable adventure. I love the Brussels setting. I'd been to Brussels a couple of years ago, so that felt very familiar. I liked the sort of the stealthy alien invasion thing. That worked really well for me. I'm a sucker for an interesting and different alien culture. I like the whole space race thing. That was very much in my wheelhouse. So just a really fun adventure. It's my first time I've read Fitz as a companion, and I really enjoyed him, and I dug with him. I had no idea until about 2/3 of the way through that Angie was going to become a companion, and it was only when I was looking at the list on Wikipedia of EDAs because I was deciding which ones to buy, and I then saw, Angie's a companion, and I then thought, if she's a companion and Dave isn't a companion, I'm not sure Dave's getting out of this book. So that was a minor spoiler, which was a shame, but no, I really enjoyed it, and 2 thoughts have come out of that. The first was, having read this book and enjoyed it, and I sort of went out into fandom to see what other people thought and realised everybody bloody hates it. I listened to Joe Ford's podcast about it, and they all said it was one of the worst EDAs out there. And I thought, well, I'll go and listen to Ian Martin and Mark Cockram talk about it on their podcast, and they said it was the worst EDA out there. And I just thought, wow, this isn't just me sort of, liking it a bit more. They bloody hate it. So, look, that's fine. The Highest Science is one of my favourite new adventures, and nobody else seems to like that. That's allowed. That's cool. That's interesting. But the other thing was, as I was reading it, I thought, I'm actually really digging these EDAs, and I suddenly realised why.
Yeah, okay.
It's because it's new Doctor Who from my era.
There you go.
Suddenly from the era when I was still an active fan, when I was 20, 21, 22, when these books were being written. And so it feels like the Doctor Who that I grew up with, or at least it feels like the Doctor Who that was around when I was a teenager, but they're new stories. So it's not new Doctor Who in the vibe of 2026. It's new Doctor Who in the vibe of 2001. And I just thought, that's awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah. Or someone writing in 2026 trying to pretend it's 2001, which never works. It always becomes a pastiche.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So look, I've said before, I never really dived into the Eighth Doctor. I don't have a problem with McGann, but I wasn't a fan of the telly movie. I've listened to 3 of his big finishes. They're good, but I wasn't sort of like, oh my God, this is the guy. But no, in these EDAs, I am slowly starting to go, okay, I start to get why people really like this guy. I start to get why the Paul McGann Doctor is got the following he has. He's not leaping up my chart of favourite Doctors at this point, but yeah, this is 2000 era Doctor Who, new, of which I'm pretty unspoiled, and that's actually an incredibly cool thing to have found and brought out in my 40s.
Yeah, well, I'm naturally delighted if people go back and listen to our List Makers episode on our favourite Doctors. McGann is my second favourite Doctor.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm delighted you're reading these, Dave.
Yeah, no. So I have bought a stack more, and I will just now start putting EDAs into my rotation.
Fantastic. Meanwhile, I've been rereading an EDA this month, Dave, because I recently recommended The Adventuress of Henrietta Street to you. And you immediately found a copy, which surprised me to buy at a decent price. That doubly surprised me. And I thought, oh Christ, I better reread the thing. Firstly, because you might want to discuss it with me in months ahead. And secondly, because I talked a big game about it, despite not having read it for almost 25 years. A quarter of a bloody century. So I suddenly had this panic that what impressed me in my mid-20s might not impress me as much now. But I'm down to the last 30 pages as we sit here tonight, and it's exactly as I remembered, so I haven't sold you a pup. Without getting too spoilerific for you or for the listeners, just to give a bit of a taste of this, it's not really what you expect an EDA to be like. The plot itself is straightforward enough. We're back in the late 1700s. The Doctor, Angie and Fitz, there they are again, Dave, are investigating why these grotesque babuin creatures, these ape-like things that just appear and tear people apart, are appearing around London and around the wider world. That's the very, very basic synopsis of the plot. What makes it really notable, though, is the way it's written. I don't think it's hyperbole to say it may be the strangest Doctor Who novel you'll ever read. And listeners too, if you're intrigued enough to go out and find it. Because it's presented as though an historian has pieced it together from records and letters and diary entries, and then written it up as, those really engaging history books where the author injects a bit of their own personality and tells the history like it's a story. You know those books, Dave?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, which is unique for a Doctor Who novel. And it means we're getting all the action second hand, so there's very little dialogue. And there's no access to what characters are thinking or why things are happening. So the Doctor in particular behaves in ways that seem really bizarre. And you think, now, why would he be doing that? Or even just, what the hell's going on now? Because we're seeing this stuff through the lens of other people and it's captured only in fragments. A person can record back in the 1700s that the Doctor was lying in bed on such and such a date. He was coughing up black bile. But they don't explain why this was happening or what the Doctor felt about it or what he might have said to someone about it, because they don't know those things. And all of this is before you layer on Lawrence Miles's love of magic and weird shit. you know, which
Yep,
you'll
yep.
already know from having read previous works with faction paradox in them. Because there are moments in this novel, I guarantee you'll genuinely stop and check the cover to make sure you're still reading a Doctor Who novel. You just have to run with it. That's my only advice. Even the opening of the story, where we have this prostitute having tantric sex with a client, and it's referred to as black coffee, without any further explanation. You find yourself thinking, hang on, what? Why is this happening? What does that mean? What's the backstory to that term? Am I meant to know something at this point in the novel? Have I missed something already? And this is Doctor Who, isn't it? So, yes, have fun with that novel when you get to it, Dave.
No, I absolutely will read it. The other advice that you gave me, and there was a conversation on social media about it where others agreed, was that you do need to actually invest and sort of sit down and read, the first 50 or 60 pages in a sitting. So it's not going to be one of those books that I grab to, read 40 pages on the flight here, 30 on a flight here, 20 before bed. The next time I have a sort of, I have a solid afternoon because I'm on a long flight or I'm on holiday or something, and I can sit down and just say, right, I've got 2 or 3 hours, I'm going to dig in. That's when I'll do it. So it won't be the next book I read, but I will read it.
Yeah, you would do yourself a disservice and the story a disservice if you tried to read it like that, or just read 2 pages when you're on the dunny or something. It's not that kind of book.
No, absolutely. I got that, so I will save it for the right moment. And something else we're going to save for the right moment, and that moment is tomorrow, is our main chat on the Gatwa era, the ultimate cold take. And because of the way we've done this now, when you get to part 2, we'll be diving straight into that topic. And this will be out in 24 hours' time. Or if you've downloaded this late, you can listen to it back to back. I think we'll leave it there.
Sounds good to me. I'll see you all tomorrow.
Next time on Star Trek The Next Generation, etc.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to
The Doctor Who Show with Rob and Dave.
Find us online by searching for
The Doctor Who Show.
We also love it when you write in. Drop us a line anytime at hello@thedwshow.net.
Right.